Lovely. Shall we start, I think? So, Borodar, everybody, good morning. Thank you so much, as always, for making time in your busy lives to join us today for what I think, as always, will be a really interesting and important meeting of the Digital Inclusion Alliance Network. It's great to see so many of you here, and we have a number of speakers to interest you today. So this session is devoted to priority 4 in the Alliance's agenda, which is about digital skills. But it's going to have a particular focus on artificial intelligence. It's now impossible to have any meeting without talking about artificial intelligence, it would seem. But actually, it's very, very relevant to the work of the Alliance. And I guess just by way of a brief introduction, we have a busy agenda, and actually we've got a couple of other small items of any other business we want to share with you as well between now and 12 o'clock. So I won't give too much of a preamble, but just to make, I suppose, the obvious point. And I don't know if any of you were listening to the radio this morning. There was a guy on the radio espousing all the positive qualities of AI. And why it was such a good thing. He was one of the founders of Microsoft, and he's on their board. But he was kind of going, if you want to get the good things out of AI, you have to be aiming to get the good things out of it, not just talking about all the things that are a risk. And AI is it is an enormous opportunity for people who are digitally anxious or unconfident, because it could potentially be a leveler up. You know, if you've got a tool that will help you write a great letter or write an application for a job or put together a PowerPoint presentation, some things that you're not maybe very confident with, and there's a tool that will help you do that, that could be a really important leveler for people who are maybe don't have the digital skills of other people. But if you are anxious about digital, then it's a very good reason currently to be more anxious, because all you hear about is all the kind of potential downside of AI. And there was a very interesting AI conference in the Welsh Government held 2 or 3 weeks ago, where one of the areas of the subject was about employment and HR, and people saying that jobs that previously you'd have had 4 or 5 applications for, they're now getting 400 because they've all been written by AI and they're all quite similar. And the HR folk were being a bit critical about that, but then saying that they were using AI to evaluate all those applications. So it's real, it's happening. These things are happening now. This is not just something for the future. So we're going to have 2 sessions or 2 talks about that, and we're very grateful. So Emma Stone's going to talk to us about AI literacy, and we've got Ruairi from Digital Community Wales, and he's also going to talk about the training that DCW are offering on that. So I hope that will be a real interest. We're then going to have a breakout, and we're really interested to hear from all of you on the ground, what you're finding in terms of AI, what people are asking you about, what support you're offering. Do you think you have the skills and the understanding and knowledge? Because this is happening so fast. I've been learning a lot about agentic AI in the last week, for example, which seems extraordinary. So we're going to have a bit of a breakout. That's really just for you to tell us what, kind of where things are now in the real world. And then we're going to talk about various other things too in the agenda. So I won't talk anymore because I'm really keen we hear from our speakers. So if I could ask Emma from Good Things Foundation, who's going to kick us off and talk about AI literacy.
Sorry, Hamish. There was a brief change in the agenda. It's Michael Skeldon. Apologies.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's my fault.
I saw you are here,
but Michael is definitely the right person to be guiding you through the work we've been doing in this space.
Lovely. Thank you. Sorry, I'm working off an old agenda. I do apologize. Yeah, thank you. Michael, over to you.
Thank you very much, Hamish. I will just share my screen. There we go. So hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me along today. I would like to give you a brief overview of the work that Good Things Foundation has been doing into looking at AI and digital inclusion. So over the last year, we've been exploring this really, and our aim was try to understand more about how to better support people who are not active users of the internet, make sense of everything they're hearing in social media. As Hamish was saying, it's everywhere now, and whether people are engaging with digital technology or not, they're hearing these phrases and trying to make sense of it. So from speaking to members of our network about AI, we understood that there's a lot of misinformation, fear, and just a general lack of understanding when it comes to AI. So many people were reluctant to engage or even have a conversation about AI. And the challenge is that by not tackling these misconceptions, people can be left further behind if they haven't learned how to use and interact with it safely. And obviously, AI has the potential to benefit people who could find it most difficult to engage with technology. So maybe through AI assistance, translations, reading aids, voice control, things like that. So lots of opportunities there. And without knowledge of these tools, let alone the confidence to try them, people can be at an even greater disadvantage than they already be at. So last year, we conducted some research with members of the National Digital Inclusion Network to try and understand how to best support people with low or even no digital skills as part of their AI journey. And following this research, we produced a report exploring how we can support people to safely engage with AI. And it includes 12 key findings about supporting digitally excluded people, and I just want to highlight 3 of them today. And the full report is available on our website, and there are links in the slides, which I'm sure you'll get shared later. It's a lot on this slide, so I'm just going to pause for a few seconds just to let you process it. But essentially, what we're saying here is that someone who's got no foundational digital skills and little understanding how to stay safe online, they're going to find it really difficult to engage in AI literacy, even if they could benefit greatly from it. If they're largely offline, there's a lot of fear and mistrust about AI, and that's fueled, of course, by what we're hearing in the media. And what we've found is that there are some fundamental building blocks to an individual being able to engage with AI. So they need to be able to transact safely online, understand when to spot sources of information that can't be trusted, and feel confident as well that they can troubleshoot those problems as they arise. So before introducing AI literacy, it's really important to have these foundational skills and then embed AI learning within that existing learning as they continue to develop that confidence and skills. So learning about AI should be tailored to the individual's needs. They need to know how they can use AI practically in their everyday lives, and that can help reduce fear and ensure that AI can be seen as an opportunity rather than a threat and something to fear. We've seen members of the network supporting clients using AI for writing CVs and letters, even things like creating art and music, and lots of other things as well. So it's all about making that learning experience relative to their circumstances, and so it helps promote buy-in and engagement. And providing a safe and supportive environment to learn new skills is really important. But with some of the biggest barriers around learning AI revolving around trust and misinformation, having a safe learning space is really important. Somewhere where you can make mistakes in a safe environment and then learn from them. Because, of course, failing in a safe way is a key part of the learning experience. And that can make a really big difference to people who have got low or no digital skills, giving them that safety net to practice and then fail and realize it's okay, can help boost that engagement. But crucially, people working and volunteering in community-based organizations, they also need help. They're often considered to be experts across a wide range of subjects, but learning about AI, even for people who are digitally confident, can feel overwhelming. And our research told us that people in grassroots organizations don't always feel confident to support people learning about AI when their own knowledge is lacking. They feel they need to get their skills and confidence up before they can have those conversations and provide that support. So it's important that the tutors, if you like, the people who are supporting other people, aren't left behind in this conversation. So taking learnings from all this research, we've produced some resources to help support members of the network. But one of our resources is an Introduction to Artificial Intelligence video. This is a short animated video which aims to reduce the fear and misconceptions of AI by focusing on the positives and highlighting that people might already be using and engaging with AI without realizing it. So personalized TV recommendations, online shopping suggestions, or what they see in their social media feeds. And for staff and volunteers at community organisations, we've created a suite of resources to help them get started in their own AI journey. And some examples are shown here. So we've got a collection on our website, highlight various tools they could use, how they can write effective prompts, which of course is a key part of generative AI, and various other tools and resources they can use in their support. We've also created and have been delivering an AI training series. It's been really well received by the attendees. The last of our current events about AI tools is in April. And we've also been working with Ofcom to develop some media literacy content for Learn My Way. In case you're not sure, Learn My Way is our free online learning platform that's available in English and in Welsh. And this content's going live in May and September. That was everything I wanted to share with you about what we've been doing. There's the full report on our website. You can sign up to the sessions I mentioned and see some of those resources, and links to all that is available in the slides.
Thank you so much, Michael. That's brilliant, very succinct, and it looks like there's some great resources there. So hopefully people will be logging in to pick those up later. I mean, I should to set this in context, there is of course a lot of stuff happening at governmental and national level as well, and I think members of the network should try and be appraised of that as well, or at least try and keep up to date with what's happening with that. So Welsh Government have published a report about using artificial intelligence at work. I think that was out in December. We can put all the links to this or share all the links with you afterwards. DSIT, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, which is the UK government department responsible for various things, including technology and innovation. And they produced a report in November, assuring a responsible future for AI. Wales has established an AI commission for AI in health and social care, and that is gently working its way through this, and no doubt will produce various reports in due course. So there is a lot happening in terms of the governance and the ethics. What I think was so helpful, Michael, from you, and I'm sure we will get from Ruairi too, is the kind of practical stuff rather than the policy stuff. And it's the practical stuff, I think, that's going to make a real difference. So thank you very much. We've that's a brave thing to say this, but we've probably got a couple of minutes. If anyone had any burning questions they wanted to ask Michael, then there is an opportunity. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll move on to Ruairi. And of course, you can put things in the chat as well. Yes, Emma, thank you.
Yeah, I suppose it's more a reflection building up of what you've just said, because I think one of the reasons why we're getting into this practical space is that, as you said, there's a lot of work going on, AI, future of work, AI-enabled public services. And one of the things that I think all of us are needing to keep an eye out for is how that that doesn't then detract from the importance of getting those foundations right in terms of digital access and digital inclusion and digital skills. And so I think, you know, as Michael was saying, that's what we're really trying to do is build digital inclusion really into some of the practice as a route to also into the policy as well. Because if you know, the amazing AI-enabled public service transformations. And of course, that comes with a whole load of risks that a lot of people are rightly talking about, and we've kind of signaled those as well. But you've got a possible policy problem where that becomes divorced. And actually, I love that there's so much I do love about, for example, the UK government's Digital Inclusion Action Plan, but it is pretty light on talking about AI and on thinking about the essential skills and understandings and literacies that the groups that we're all most concerned about may need and would then need support to develop. So I just thought that might just be helpful in terms of you know, knitting, as you say, that policy and practice point together, because there is a risk that the talk will become all about AI, and that the talk about digital inclusion will not sufficiently be thinking about the future world, which is here now, to be honest. So I thought that reflection might be helpful.
Thanks, Emma. No, I agree. And interestingly, I was challenging the AI Commission for Health and Social Care in Wales as to how it was engaging with patients and users, never mind the digitally excluded. And it's pretty light on it. So in fact, we're trying to make sure that the network is represented in that work, because for all the reasons that you've said. So and just in the spirit of AI, something has just popped up on my screen and says, it sounds like you have switched to speaking Persian. So there you go, a hallucinating computer in front of me. Right, so with that, let's move on, I think, and hear what Digital Community Wales are doing in their programs to support people around AI. So Ruairi.
Thanks, Hamish. Hello, everybody. I'm Ruairi. Wales. I'm just going to talk to you for 10 minutes about what we've been talking about this morning, but sort of focusing a little bit on the approach you should take with people, maybe clients that you're supporting, so that they are not terrified to their bones about this stuff, because we're in a place where we've never been before. The sort of scope and the ability of this technology is increasing more rapidly than anything we've ever known before. And I would say, if you, let's say as a tutor, if you're supporting people on the ground to be digitally included, you may feel a little bit overwhelmed and like, oh, do I know enough? Can I just say that we're all kind of feeling that? I don't know. I speak personally, when I think about the last couple of training sessions I've run on AI, on the last two, the morning of those training sessions, I've been doing a little bit of Googling and I've discovered something new it can do, which I've then hastily thought, oh, I've got to include this. I've got to show people this new thing that it can do. The last one, I think, being the fact that it can just create a podcast out of thin air. You just feed it a document about anything. You can make up a document using something like ChatGPT, some crazy, fantastical thing. And then you'll, a few minutes later, have two real sounding human beings chatting about that subject. I mean, it's, you know, it is blowing my mind constantly. And for a lot of us, I think there's a lot of excitement with some of the things it can do, but then obviously comes with it a lot of the fears that people have. So I'm just going to share my screen and just talk about those fears a little bit, and how we sort of approach the subject so that we, you know, there's like a balancing act in, let me just pull these slides up. There's a balancing act between a couple of things that Hamish and Michael have already sort of mentioned. The truth is that AI is making our digital technology more accessible. and it has been for a while. So the first thing to say, and I think someone's already mentioned it, is that you may be supporting someone who perhaps has a smartphone and they've been doing some stuff on that, or a tablet. They may not be aware that they've been using AI already, whether it is just from being recommended TV shows on Netflix, or just talking to their Siri or their Alexa. Once we start to explain that, oh, you're already in the world, you're already using this stuff, that can certainly help to sort of reduce the fear, because people do have many fears, and it's completely understandable. Fears such as the loss of control, feeling like AI is taking over decision making, the worry that it's going to replace all our jobs. And I'll come in a second, I'll talk a little bit about how I would approach these conversations with people. People have the privacy concerns. A lot of these things have been concerns for a long time, just with the digital world. You know, when we think about the automatic checkouts in supermarkets, you know, a lot of people have struggled with that over the years. The privacy concerns, fear of surveillance and data misuse, the big brother state that we sort of live in. The complexity, feeling overwhelmed by something they don't understand. And that goes back to something that's been mentioned as well. People hearing things on the news, horror stories, all these new terms, all these new phrases. And it doesn't help that nearly every big movie in the last 10 to 20 years that's been made around AI, whether it's Ex Machina or iRobot, have a very dystopian view of where we're heading with this technology. So how do we approach that? How do we give people the skills and the knowledge and the understanding of AI without having them run for the hills? So I've got a good example of this recently. I was talking about AI to a group, and a person said to me, I'm not touching any of this AI. It's terrifying. I've seen all the horror stories. It's going to take over our jobs. It's going to take over humanity. I'm scared of it. I'm not touching it. So what I did was I put things in terms of a world that that person understood. And this is what I said, and it's very simple. I said, have you ever heard stories in the news of people being hurt in car crashes? And this person said to me, yes, of course I have. I've seen that. And I said, has it stopped you going in a car? Has it stopped you driving a car or being a passenger in a car? And they said, no. And I said, well, why is that? And I said, well, I understand that, you know, bad things do happen in cars, but it's a relatively low risk. As long as I wear a seatbelt and I drive at the speed limit, bad things are unlikely to happen. And I said, you know, with digital technology, with the internet, with AI, it's the same thing. The fears that people have are based on a misconception that it is inherently dangerous. Because if we look at the news, if I go on the BBC News website right now, I would say probably around 80% of the things I see on that website are bad things happening, bad stories, bad things happening to people. That is the majority of what makes up the news. So obviously when people are basing their knowledge of this subject on the news that they see, hear on the radio, or come across on social media, they are often going to be sort of scary stories. They're going to be things that put people off, but that's not the reality. So at Digital Communities Wales, a lot of our training, whether we're talking about AI or just digital inclusion in general, we talk a lot about the importance of changing perceptions, because I think it's key for a lot of people, for people that are digitally excluded. One of the massive barriers they have, alongside lots of other things, is they have a misconception of the technology. They have a misconception about how difficult it's going to be. You know, I'm too old. I'll never learn this. I'll never be able to do it. When actually, thanks to the technology we're discussing this morning, these things have never been easier to use. The idea that you can control a device and get it to do stuff just by telling it, just by, you know, telling your phone to put a doctor's appointment in your calendar, and it will just do it for you. So partly, again, echoing what's already been said, demonstrate how this technology makes using a device so much easier. Show them how they might think they're going to have to learn computer skills, lots of complicated new skills, where actually, in many cases, there's not a huge amount of skills they're going to have to learn, because this technology allows them to do stuff that's so accessible. And, you know, in terms of replacing jobs and things, technology has always been this. Technology develops, the world changes, and we adapt. And I can speak, my sister's a graphic designer, and I had a conversation with her not that long ago. I said, well, how are you feeling about the fact that, you can get AI to just create things for you now, images, graphics, illustrations? And she said, it's brilliant. I'm including it in what I use in my job. And she recently had a photograph that she'd taken of someone, but they didn't have enough of the person's body in the shot. And in the past, she would have had to have gone out and take that photo again. But AI was able to extend the image so it went just below the head, and it had the shoulders in as well. So that was my sister in that scenario, utilizing this technology rather than fearing that it's going to take over. It is here, and it's really important that you, when supporting others, the more knowledge and the more sort of emphasis you place on just finding out what's possible, what tools there are, the more you're equipped to show people and to validate their concerns, because we all feel a little bit, I don't know, I can speak for myself, it can just feel overwhelming. So you can say to people, I understand why this is worrying you. There's a lot to take in. There's all these new tools. There's all these new amazing things it can do. As ever, and we talk, obviously, Digital Communities Wales, it's all about digital inclusion. It's about avoiding the technical jargon, keeping explanations simple and relatable. And where you can, sharing real life examples of AI helping people rather than replacing them. So a lot of what we do, we talk about accessibility. And I've talked about how this technology can make devices easier to use. It can also turn our phones and our tablets into invaluable tools to help people in their offline world. As an example, if we think about an app like Seeing AI, which allows a person to hold the camera of their phone over some text on a page and it'll read it out to them. So for someone with sight loss, what an incredible free to use app that they can have on their phone, which previously, going back a few years, if you wanted a piece of technology that did that thing, it was a machine that cost about £5,000 and it lived in your living room. Now we can just have it on our phones. So again, it's all about the approach, and it's all about changing perceptions. And it's all about making it clear to people that we can utilize this technology to help us, to make our lives easier. And just like all technology, it has pros and cons. And the cons of the technology are not inherently because the technology is dangerous, because that's what people think. AI is dangerous. The internet is dangerous. The danger, unfortunately, just comes from other human beings utilizing it in the wrong way. And all technology has pros and cons. I mean, it mentions electricity there. People get electrocuted. That is a major con of electricity, but the positives it provides us in our world far outweigh, as long as we use it safely. And again, I'm using terms there that will make sense to a person because they know about electricity. Not that anyone really understands electricity either, to be honest. They may already be using, the people you're supporting may already be using, as I've said, AI in various forms. But we can, it says on the screen there, they might be using spell check when they're using Microsoft Word. That's something that helps us. That's an intelligence within the computer system that's going to support them to write a better letter or a better document. So it's about using the technology to help us, but we are always in control. And you make it clear to the people that, you as the human can take full control and utilize this technology to help you. This is not about the technology taking over. Comparing it to everyday tools they already trust. So it may be that, the person you're supporting, if they're anything like me, they rely heavily on Google Maps. It is the savior of their world. So if they are already talking to their Alexa, point out that you are already utilizing this technology and it is helping you because you're just asking to speak to, someone on the phone, or you're asking for a radio station to play. And if there's one thing you can say about AI, it's a playground for curiosity. As I said, last few training sessions I've run, I've discovered things just before the day itself, and I've been, oh wow, this is amazing, I've got to show people this. So explore with people and make it clear, you are no more of an expert than anybody else, because this stuff is changing and running so quickly. And as I say, the news tends to give us the horror stories, not the experience of the majority. So make sure people are aware of that too. And finally, it's a really good idea because, there are so many AI tools out there. There are so many new things. Do it in small, manageable chunks. Maybe choose, maybe you're going to look at using a chatbot like ChatGPT and you're going to explore what it can do. Maybe write us a funny poem or a short story or a limerick or something. One of the great things about AI is it can be an amazing engagement tool. And I've done it with people who have been digitally excluded. And one of the first things I've had them experience is, getting AI to write a poem. So we fed it some details about the person and their life, and it's written this lovely poem about them. And the people have been like, oh, that's amazing. That's fantastic. So you can actually utilize it as a way in to, getting people interested in using digital technology. Encourage hands-on experience, trying voice assistants or AI generated captions on YouTube. By the way, if someone has an Alexa, you can ask it to have, you can add ChatGPT to it, so it's more of a conversation. And if you haven't spoken to something like ChatGPT and had a conversation, you'd be amazed at how much more it's like talking to another human being on there. Or it could be something, as it says on the screen, like, AI generated captions, another really, really useful application of this technology that's really going to help a lot of people. I'll finish by saying, like, the thing that we talk about always in all of our training sessions in terms of digital inclusion, in terms of supporting others who are new to this stuff, the key to it all is a conversation that you have with that person at the start. And the more you know about that person and their interests and their hobbies and their history and their past, what you want to do is tailor their experience of the digital world to them. And obviously we can include AI in that. The more you know about the person, the more you can make their experience of being online feel personal to them, the more likely they are to drop those barriers and engage with the technology, because it's going to feel personal and it's going to touch them somewhere that goes beyond their preconceptions of this is going to be tricky and complicated and horrible and scary. Okay, I'm going to stop. Thank you very much. Rory, if we've got time, if anyone has any questions.
Rory, that's been brilliant. There's a lively activity going on in the chat, so that's good. For those of you who are kind of making comments about your experience of engaging with groups and stuff, which has been really helpful, please do bring that out in the discussions we're about to have, because that is very interesting. And to summarize briefly, I think it would be fair to say people are saying that they're finding that for some people it is really engaging to talk about this, and that a lot of the people doing training or providing support would like to be more skilled and more knowledgeable about it. I think there's a fair observation from Neil Pollock, which is that we've kind of badged AI as if as if it was one thing, whereas of course it's a whole range of different things. And in fact, with agentic AI, it's even more than that. And there probably is an important distinction to draw between generative AI and chatbots and so on in terms of their risk or the anxiety. We haven't got time for that this morning, but I think it's a fair point. But it's the next step of the conversation. I would have thought that there's AI, but then within AI there are different things, and they work in different ways, and they have relative good and bad things about them. But it's a fair point, Neil. So thank you for that.
Sorry, Hamish, yes. Can I quickly just jump in? Sorry, I forgot to mention. Yeah. Sarah's put in the chat. There is a link to our next training session on AI, which is on the 23rd of April. So if anyone wanted to sign up to that open access webinar, please do. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really good. And I think that is the takeaway from both Michael and Ruairi, is that we need to make sure that those who are delivering support are confident themselves. They have a reasonable grasp of what is a quite rapidly evolving landscape. Should we say that AI has been around for 54 years, but ChatGPT came along and that kind of changed the world. And the other thing, in case people don't know, is that Microsoft have recently bought a company called Nuance, who used to do Dragon Dictate. So they are very much they're rolling out M365 Copilot, and for health, they're rolling out a health version of it. So they will be very much in the same game as Siri and Alexa in terms of voice and so-called ambient AI of listening and interpreting. So as you rightly say, voice is going to be, I think, a real game changer for people who are not confident with keyboards and mouse and so on. So with that, we're going to go into a breakout session because we're really keen to hear more. We've got a bit of it in the chat already, but really keen to hear more about your experiences of what you're encountering, what the challenges are, what the positives are, how you're going about addressing those. So we'd be really grateful for that. Sarah's going to put us into groups. We're going to come back, I think, although I'm not actually not sure which agenda I'm working off now, but I think around past. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, that's right. And it's
Lovely.
just a chance. There will be a few questions in the chat there in the breakout rooms, but it's just prompts. If your discussion goes in a different direction, feel free to go in that direction.
Fantastic. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a lively conversation. We had a great conversation in our group, and I'm sure you all did in yours. It would be perhaps just, we've just got a couple of minutes just to pick up on whether kind of what, if there are any key messages or themes from your group. We didn't have facilitators particularly in the groups, but if there's anyone who wanted to raise any particular points. I guess, and actually it plays back to the point that we had in the chat from Neil, that there is what we heard in our group, I think, is that people saying that the anxieties are probably, I mean, what has changed, isn't it, is that AI is now something for the citizen to use as opposed to something that businesses were using. That's probably a kind of change. And there's probably more anxiety around generative AI. And we heard from a colleague in Pembrokeshire about people not knowing what to trust anymore. Is that photograph isn't the photograph that was taken. That's that skyline doesn't look like that skyline. Somebody's just has used generative AI on the product. The idea of sticking shoulders and a neck onto a portrait photograph, for example. So there is this anxiety, probably more in the generative space. And therefore, to Neil's point, there is probably some merit in us making that distinction when we're talking to people about AI, between things that are digital assistants, for example, like Alexa, which I'd be interested to know what other people felt, but generally people seem to think most people thought was a helpful tool and didn't really think of as AI. And then a really important message around its use particularly for ethnic minorities and people whose first language is not English. The extraordinary power of translation and interpretation that is really opening up opportunities for people from other cultures. So that was just a kind of few of our key themes, I guess. And anyone else from any of the other groups want to kind of add to that?
We talked a little bit about criticality in our group, and the fact that there's a need to be aware of what you're asking, and the danger of becoming too reliant on whatever sort of AI is producing for you, in the sense that you just, like with the sat nav, you just become reliant on it and follow it blindly when you can lead you down a dead end. And there's a need for that. And there were some really good points in the group about how there's a need, I suppose, for education almost of how to actually interact with AI to get something which is valuable, and a need to make sure that you are not just accepting everything and just taking it as standard, but actually you use that as your starting point, and then you work on what the AI produces to make sure you're not losing the uniqueness. And there's an example of minutes being taken, and obviously in a meeting, and AI generating minutes, but actually those minutes are very, very bland and don't really, they sort of reflect it, but there's a lot which is missing that only can be produced by somebody who's actually sitting in the meeting and giving those nuances and identifying what was really important. So that was a good example of that. So I think that's what we had, quite a good conversation. It was interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. And that echoes a couple of things. One of the other things actually from our group was really I thought was really powerful, the examples of where people were who had a particular problem they were facing in life or a concern they had were using AI as a kind of companion and mentor, really, to get to or a coach to just to talk to, rather than being able to talk to families and friends. They were just getting in the car if they were a bit wound up and talking to AI for 10 minutes, and which is really interesting, I think, as a use as well. There's a lot of talk about human in the loop, particularly in healthcare and AI. People who are very anxious that clinicians will be absent, and it'll be all your decisions will be made by a bot. And so the kind of reassurance that's being offered is, well, don't worry, there'll always be a human in the loop. But in reality, at the same time, people are saying that AI will help solve the staffing crisis. And in truth, there will have to be a point where there is no longer an AI and a human in the loop. Otherwise, it won't give us that advantage. And anxiety about people who are already losing jobs in translation and interpretation, for example. So, was there a kind of did anyone have any particular tips that they were using about how to build confidence for people who are feeling anxious about AI? Is it just about explaining it to people, or is it going to be and telling them that they may not realize it, but they're already using it, or is there more to it than that?
Hamish, can I come in? It's Harriet. I think my feeling is that there's almost this there is this kind of myth around, or maybe it's not a myth, that AI is cleverer, better than human intelligence. And that, I think, is almost the most problematic thing, because, I just give you a quick example. I asked AI if a certain word in French was feminine or masculine. It gave me two responses. One said it was feminine, and the other said it was masculine. It's who knows how that happened, but those things happened. I didn't think you were talking Persian just then, Hamish.
Yes.
So what I think is absolutely critical, and I said it in our group, is that we must understand that AI is the servant of us. It will, we can ask it to help us, but we are the boss. It is the servant. It doesn't know everything we know. It knows some other stuff, and that could help us, but we're in charge. And you talked about, there being a human in the loop. I think, there's different ways of having a human in the loop, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, a human checks every result that an AI gives. But I think it is critical that, there is absolutely that servant relationship, and that, this is just a tool for us to use, and we shouldn't assume it's cleverer, better, etc., etc. And I think that is a risk.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's good. And I was just looking at Paul, do you want to just expand on your point in the chat? Because that's really interesting.
Yeah, sure. So I use it a lot for work and for personal stuff. I understand what it is. I understand more or less how it works. I'm not a data scientist. I do have a son who keeps telling me I'm not quite smart enough to really understand it. But I think, yeah, my experience is that it can be personally and professionally immensely helpful. One of the ways I try and characterize it for people when I talk to people about it, I do a lot of evangelizing and engaging, mostly with staff, but also with other organizations, where I introduce them to it in a soft, gentle way, usually by playing with Copilot, just asking it a few questions. And, if they've not used it before, there's always that jaw-dropping moment when they realize the type of things it's capable of doing. And that creates buzz and engagement and helps to overcome fear and can sort of break barriers down to good icebreaker. But the way in which I characterize it is it's a big hyperdimensional space, and bits of that space are really smart and bits of it aren't so smart. And if you engage with it in a fairly smart way, you'll get smart stuff out of it. And if you engage with it in a very simple way, you'll get simple stuff out of it. And to answer Harriet's point, what it was doing there is learning. So you were giving an A/B option because it was in test. It didn't know, and it wanted you to basically help train it. through what's called reinforced learning from human feedback. And that's part of what ChatGPT and others will do periodically to try and improve their systems. That's why you get those split answers sometimes. So it will keep getting smarter when people like you who know whether it's feminine or masculine tell it, and so on. But yeah, my experience is that it's basically really, really good at helping you reflect on what's going on in your own head, think in a more clear and structured way, ask better questions. And the more you use it, the better you get at prompting it well and getting more out of it, really.
Fantastic. I think that's probably quite a good point to draw a close to this bit of the conversation. But there's some really rich comments in the chat, so thank you very much for that. We'll use an AI bot to produce a summary and share it with you, and you can decide whether it's an accurate reflection. Because we've got just a few other things to get into, but I'm sure we're going to come back to this. And actually, I think we probably should be coming back to it because it is such a rapidly evolving field. And because our governments respectively seem to think it is the solution to many problems. So we'll be seeing a lot more of it in our lives, I think, as well. So thank you so much for that really rich conversation and for everybody's views. And I would echo again, the resources that we've had shared with us already online through the presentations that are online would clearly be good things to go and have a look at if you haven't already done so. We're going to move on, and Sarah, just over to you for a bit, and then we've got a couple of bits of any other business if we have time.
Yeah, no problem. So I've just put a link into the chat to an MS form, as we do every meeting now. It's a survey about the priority area. If you could click on it right now and do it now in the meeting, I will give you a few minutes. I'd really appreciate it. I know it's harder to fit it in afterwards. It'll only take a few minutes, I promise, but the information is really vital to us and to how we run this alliance. So, when Old Bell 3 did their evaluation of the DCW program, they used our Exploring Impact reports as part of their information, and that's what these surveys fill into. And particularly as we look at future funding options and see where we are and where DIAW sits in the digital inclusion agenda in Wales. So it's really important. If you could please just have a look at it now and fill it out. I will give you a couple minutes of tense silence, so you have no choice except to fill it out.
Excellent.
If someone could tell me that it's working, that would be fabulous.
It's working.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you.
And it is quick to complete because I'm on question 5.
Okay, excellent. I've given up on the Zoom polls because they never seem to work, so we'll just go straight into MS Forms. And while you're all working on that, I'm just going to share my screen because I'm also going to do the next bit.
I think people are still concentrating, so I think they're still doing it.
I've shared my screen now, so I can't see the concentrating faces anymore. But
there are concentrating faces.
Okay, if you could let me know when we look less concentrating, I'll get started on the next part.
So we'll give people another couple of minutes, I think.
Okay.
We're nearly there. If people who've completed it could put on a not concentrating face, that would be helpful. It's great that you are concentrating. I think we're pretty nearly there. People can leave it open and finish it. One of the many hopeless things about MS Forms is that if it doesn't make it very easy to come back to once you half filled it in. So if you haven't finished, then just leave it open for a second and then just do the last couple of questions at the end of this meeting, if you wouldn't mind. But hopefully most people have had a chance to fill it in. Fire away, Sarah, I think.
Okay. So as you all know, we've been looking at the sustainability of DIAW, which is currently tied to funding for the Digital Communities Wales programme, which does come to an end in September 2025. You will get a copy of these slides and further information. So this is really just a quick reporting back to you about the results. No analysis as of yet. So last year, Old Bell 3 was commissioned by Welsh Government to evaluate the DCW programme, which included an evaluation of DIAW. I did send a link to the evaluation to everyone, but I'll send it again in the post-meeting email. It was mainly positive, which is fantastic. The part about DIAW, this is one of the, I just pulled out a nice sort of take from it, which is great that we, have positioned ourselves as a credible voice in the digital inclusion agenda. So that's thanks to all of you and your participation in DIAW. They did make 2 recommendations, as you can see here. They do state that while they're recommending 3 years of further Welsh Government support, it is tied to a commitment to a membership model and as well as to specific outputs and outcomes. I'd remind you that this is just recommendations that have been sent to Welsh Government. This is no comment on what Welsh Government's next steps might be or what action they're going to take. Alongside that, we've sent out a future funding options survey to all of our members. Thank you to everyone who filled it out. So just a brief run through of some of the headline results. A membership model of funding was nearly a split vote, so 58 to 42. From the comments, budget constraints are a key factor in this model, with several mentioning that they would not be able to pay or would find it difficult. The corporate model of funding was 85% supported, but many of the comments are focused on concerns about the sort of the corporate agenda versus the DIAW more community-driven feel. So a need to find a corporate funder who wasn't looking to do this just to further their own agenda. The grant model of funding was even more supported at 93%, but there were doubts about DIAW's current status and whether that would make us eligible for grants and whether the model that we have would be attractive for funders. But also thank you to those of you who gave us suggestions of funding opportunities that we could look into in this area. The government funding had the highest support at 98%. Considering this is our current model, it makes sense that it would be. However, with financial pressures on government funding, questions were raised about whether this would need to be tied to specific outcomes, as suggested by the Old Bell 3 recommendation, and whether those would fit with DIAW's current sort of member-driven ethos. It does, of course, fit with Welsh Government strategy and the stated sort of importance of digital inclusion in Wales. When we asked you to rank by order of choice, government came out first, followed by grant, then membership, and then private, bringing up the rear as a first choice. The majority of respondents are happy with the 4 meetings we have every year, the quarterly meetings, but there were calls for one of those meetings to be face-to-face or perhaps an event per year, which is a nice idea. Obviously, we'd need more funding for that. But thankfully, people seem to be finding DIAW useful, which it makes me happy, of course. And I've also included just some of the general comments that people have made about DIAW. As I said, you'll get the full results and these slides so you can look through them and pick through them at your own leisure. So that was just a very brief run through. We will be sort of analysing the results and coming back to you with suggestions for next steps after this.
Thanks, Sarah. And I suppose just to make the point, particularly on the elements to do with how DIAW functions, our meetings, what's in them, how we structure them. Absolutely, it's really helpful to have that feedback. So we'll take that to the steering group and discuss how we can act upon that feedback. It wasn't just you telling us because it was interesting. We will of course try and act upon it if we can. What happens in future impact funding is kind of tied up a bit to what Welsh Government decide to do about the national programme, and indeed what they decide about the Alliance. It's perhaps just worth making people aware that Scottish Government, in fact, have had someone working for 6 months on how they would structure their Digital Inclusion Alliance, because they're constructing a Digital Inclusion Alliance inspired to some extent by the work we've done here in Wales. And we've had lots of very positive conversations with them. They've got a very they've had someone working 3 days a week for 6 months on this, and and we are represented on their external stakeholder group as they now convert that thinking into action. So there's some quite useful stuff to learn from there, because they've spent a lot of time talking and thinking to people, thinking about it, and we will have a chance, I hope, to be able to reflect some of that in our thinking too. And I hope Welsh Government may pay attention to it as well, because there's some very useful thinking in that goes with it. So thank you to everyone who gave us that feedback. That's really helpful. And as I say, we will take note and act on it. Sarah, who was going to speak next? Was Joe? Were you going to?
No, it's me again, I'm afraid.
You again.
Yeah, sorry. As I think Emma mentioned earlier, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology have produced a Digital Inclusion Action Plan. I put a link to it in the chat. There's a call for evidence, so we, as DIAW, will be responding. If there is anything you want us and you think we should include in it, please let us know. That it's due by 9th of April, but we would really encourage you to respond on your own behalf, on the behalf of your organization. So the more information they have, the more evidence they have, the more we can help them to shape the first steps that they take, which will obviously, although it will, I mean, it's UK based. It might not be Welsh Government, UK based, but it is going to have an impact on how digital inclusion is looked at here as well. So really important that we all respond.
Yeah. And just again, just to remind people, if you didn't know, the Secretary of State for DCIT, Peter Kyle, and the Minister, the Director General, and I think 5 Deputy Directors and various others came down to Ebbw Vale to engage locally, and I represented us at that. So we've already had a bit of voice on it, but it would be really important, I think, to get as much information and feedback into that consultation as possible. So please do read the plan, and please do engage either directly or via us, or both. Would be good, I think. It'd be good to have a strong Welsh response to it. And obviously you'll be able to get that link from the chat. It's a good document, I think, in fairness, isn't it? Emma, you've been very close to it, I know. Lovely. Emma, do you want to just, you've popped something in the chat, but do you just want to highlight about the minimum digital living standard?
Yeah, I think Sarah's kindly going to circulate the link as well after the meeting. But it was just to say, you know, we're sharing emerging findings from the next stage of the minimum digital living standard work. And for those of you who are familiar with it, the first stage focused on families, so households with children, whereas these are now going through the process of engaging with members of the public around what older households need, single and couple households, and also what working age households without dependent children, again, single and couple households need. So this isn't the final report. There's no publication with it, but we wanted to really create an opportunity for people who are really interested in this to find out, hear the emerging findings, and that will also then help to shape the final publication and some of the thinking, because the team will still be processing what they're hearing from members of the public about this. So thanks for being able to do that shout out. And also, just to add to what you and Sarah have been saying, the more responses that the call for evidence gets, including from kind of, you know, any sort of organisation. So you could be a local provider, you might be kind of providing across Wales, social housing, library, you know, the more responses they get, the more it does help to underline that this is important, and everyone in this room will have different perspectives on what the priorities should be and what the most important issues are. And it's just so important for government to hear from that real breadth of perspectives as well.
Yeah. And perhaps just to add to that, if I may, Emma, what was very clear was from the Secretary of State is that they're coming at this from an economy and productivity angle. That they said to us that at the meeting that the Prime Minister had, you know, personally was very interested in this, and their focus, as you know, is about growth in the economy, and they think that digital exclusion is a barrier to growth. So they see it very much through an economic productivity growth lens, instead of a social justice inclusivity type lens. And actually that's not unhelpful, because, you know, follow the money, that's where things tend to happen. But we may want to also make sure they don't lose sight of the other elements of digital inclusion that are so important.
Absolutely. But I think the other lens is the other thing that the Secretary of State is responsible for, is thinking about kind of online government services as well. And so I think that's where there's a massive inclusion issue. And whilst there's recognition that other channels will stay available, everyone in this virtual room knows just how important online access is across every area of people's lives, including accessing the online services. So I think that is another really important angle, Hamish.
Thank you very much, Emma. So please do, if you try and make some time to respond to that, if you want to just tell us what you're saying, we can also try and reflect that in our response. I'm going to come quickly now, if I may, to Diana from Public Health Wales, who's got something she wanted to say to us.
Yeah, so hi everyone. So I work for Public Health Wales, and we have a research program about digital health and equity. So we're going to start a research project with some people that I can see here. Joselle is here and Scott. So the project involves developing a practical evidence-based framework to evaluate and improve actions to address digital exclusion, but it has a focus on health and well-being. So what we are looking for is to establish an advisory panel, and we are looking for individuals who would like to participate. And these are individuals who work actively with digital excluded communities. So if that's okay, I think I will share information via email to see if some of you might be interested in being part of this advisory panel. So this is a 12-month project, and we are expecting to have like 3 sessions. So basically that was it. Thank you very much.
So just to be absolutely clear, Dana, we'll put it in the if you give us the information, we'll put it out with our kind of after meeting. There's going to be a lot in this one, which is great.
Yeah.
But what you're looking for is organizations or individuals.
Yeah.
And they will be required to attend 3 meetings over a year. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So they will be, so the requirement is to kind of for them to help us if you know, in our approach, because we don't work, well, for example, researchers don't really work, you know, with people, you know, at the ground level. So we want it to be relatable, and something that can be used in practice. So that is the, what we are looking for. Yeah.
So that's a great opportunity for colleagues in the network to. It's the power of the network, isn't it? So we are fortunate to have many people who are working directly with and supporting people in our communities. So it would be brilliant to have participation in this project. It would make the outcome so much richer and better.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say for a minute that researchers don't work, but I know what you mean.
Sorry, yeah.
That's academics for you. Right, jolly good. I think, amazingly, we have got through everything we were going to get through. I've really enjoyed today's meeting. I hope you have too. It's such an important subject. And also these various other things. Please do try and come to the MDLS emerging findings sessions through Eventbrite. I think it's going to be really interesting to hear that the work that was done in households with children is really important and has been embraced and taken on board by Welsh Government. And it will be really interesting to hear what the findings are from other households too. I think it's going to be very important in terms of setting the policy for the future, hopefully. So do sign up to one of those if you want to hear what's happening. And do please help us by having a strong Welsh response to the consultation from the UK Gov on digital inclusion. If we don't take part, we can't complain if they don't reflect our thinking. With that, thank you very much indeed, as always, for your participation, your interest, and to Sarah for pulling it all together. So, and to our guest speakers, of course, to Michael and Ruairi. So thank you so much indeed. Thank you. Bye-bye.